They say you never truly know who you're sleeping next to until you have nothing left to offer them. Celine Sterling thought she had the perfect marriage. She was moments away from telling her husband, Silas, that he was going to be a father. Instead, she found her bags packed by the door and a younger woman wearing her robe sipping wine in her kitchen. Silas thought he was discarding a plain, boring housewife. He thought he was upgrading. But Silas made a fatal calculation. He didn't know that the quiet, humble woman he just threw into the rain was the only person in the world trusted by Silas Thorne, the most dangerous billionaire on Wall Street. And when the Godfather finds out his favorite goddaughter has been crossed, let's just say bank accounts don't just freeze. They evaporate. The grand-grandfather clock in the hallway of the Sterling estate chimed 7 times the sound, echoing off the cold marble floors. Celine Sterling adjusted the hem of her dress, her hands trembling slightly. It wasn't a designer gown Silas hated when she spent too much on herself, despite his 7-figure salary. But it was a soft blue silk that she had saved up for. Tonight was their 5th anniversary, but more importantly, it was the night everything would change. Celine placed a hand over her stomach. 12 weeks. She had the ultrasound picture tucked inside a small velvet box on the dinner table, right next to the vintage Merlot Silas loved. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in the mirror. She would tell him he was going to be a father. He would cry tears of joy, and the cold distance that had grown between them over the last year would finally melt away. "Please," she whispered to the empty room, "let this fix us." The sound of the front door unlocking made her heart jump. She smoothed her hair and put on her bravest smile. "Silas, I'm in the dining room. I made your favorite." Celine stopped. Silas Sterling walked into the dining room, looking as dashing as ever in his bespoke charcoal suit. But he wasn't smiling, and he wasn't alone. Clinging to his arm, wearing a dress that looked suspiciously like one Celine had lost at the dry cleaners last month, was Tiffany Vance. Tiffany was 22, the new PR intern at Silas's firm, with hair bleached platinum blonde and a smile that didn't reach her predatory eyes. "Silas." Celine's voice was barely a whisper. What is she doing here?" Silas sighed a sound of pure annoyance, as if he had just stepped in a puddle. He didn't look at the candlelit dinner. He didn't look at the velvet box. He looked at Celine with bored exhaustion. "We need to talk, Celine." And I didn't want to drag it out. Tiffany giggled, nuzzling into his shoulder. "He means he's too nice to say it harsh, sweetie. So I'm here for moral support." Support. Celine took a step back, her hand instinctively guarding her stomach. "It's our anniversary." "It's over, Celine," Silas said flatly. He walked over to the table, picked up the expensive bottle of wine Celine had bought, and inspected the label. He sneered. 2018, I told you I only drink the 15 vintage. You never listen." "You're leaving me." Celine felt the room spinning. "Because of wine. Silas, look at me." "It's not the wine, Celine. It's you," Silas snapped, finally making eye contact. His eyes were cold, devoid of the love she thought she saw 5 years ago. "You're plain. You're boring. You have no ambition. Look at you. You dress like a librarian, and you act like a maid. I'm a CEO now. I need someone on my arm who fits the part. Tiffany fits the part." Tiffany smirked, running a manicured hand down Silas's lapel. "I'm securing him a feature in Forbes next month. What have you done for him lately? Besides cooking pot roast." I made this home." Selina stammered, tears hot in her eyes. "I supported you when you were just a junior analyst. I paid the rent when you were broke. Ancient history." Silas waved a hand dismissively. "I've outgrown you. My lawyers drafted the papers. The house is in my name. The accounts are in my name. You signed the prenup. You get a small stipend for 6 months, which is generous considering how little you've contributed recently." "Silas, please," Celine begged, reaching for the velvet box on the table. "You don't understand. I have news. Big news. Just look inside the box." Silas glanced at the box. For a second hesitation flickered in his eyes, but Tiffany noticed it. She snatched the box before Silas could touch it. "Oh, probably another cheap watch or some sentimental garbage," Tiffany said, tossing the unopened box into the trash can in the corner of the room. "No," Celine lunged, but Silas caught her arm. His grip was painful. "Stop it!" he barked. "Have some dignity, for God's sake. Your bags are already packed. They're on the front porch." "My bags!" Celine gasped. "But where will I go? It's pouring rain outside. Silas, I have nowhere to go." "That's not my problem anymore," Silas said, shoving her lightly toward the door. "Tiffany is moving in tonight. We're redecorating the master bedroom. Get out, Celine. Don't make me call security." Celine looked at the man she had loved for half a decade. She looked at the woman smirking at her destruction. A fire ignited in her chest, not of rage, but of survival. She thought of the baby. She couldn't be dragged out by security. It would be too dangerous. "Fine," Celine whispered, her voice trembling but clear. "I'll leave. But you're making a mistake, Silas. A mistake you can't pay your way out of." Silas laughed, a cruel barking sound. "I'm worth $50 million, Celine. I can pay my way out of anything. Now get out of my house." Celine turned and walked to the front door. She opened it, and the storm outside battered her instantly. The wind howled, soaking her blue silk dress in seconds. She saw 2 suitcases sitting in the mud at the bottom of the stairs. She grabbed the handles, heavily pregnant alone and shivering. As she dragged them down the driveway, she heard the heavy oak door slam shut behind her, followed by the sound of the deadbolt sliding home. She was homeless. She was pregnant. And the father of her child had just replaced her like a used car. But as the rain mixed with her tears, Celine remembered something. A number. A phone number, written on a heavy black business card she had kept hidden in the lining of her wallet for 10 years. A number she promised she would never call unless her life depended on it. She dragged her suitcases to the bus stop shelter at the end of the street, her fingers fumbling for her phone. The bus stop offered little protection from the biting wind. Celine sat on the metal bench, her teeth chattering. She checked her bank balance on her phone, $432, last $50. The stipend Silas mentioned wouldn't kick in for weeks, if at all. He was known for stalling payments to vendors. He would certainly stall payments to an ex-wife. She looked at her phone contacts. Her parents had passed away years ago. That was when she had met Silas. He had been her rock then. Or so she thought. She had no siblings. She had isolated herself from her friends because Silas didn't like them. She was truly alone. Except for him. Her hands shook as she pulled the small black card from her wallet. The edges were worn, but the gold embossing was still sharp. S.T. No full name, no company logo, just initials and a number. She remembered the day she got it. She was 22, working as a private nurse for a cranky old man in a hospice facility. Nobody wanted to deal with him. He was demanding, secretive, and refused to speak to anyone. But Selina had been kind. She had read to him. She had protected his privacy when reporters tried to sneak in, sniffing around for a scoop about the fallen tycoon, Silas Thorne. She had nursed him back to health when everyone said he was dying. And on the day he was discharged, vanishing back into the shadows of the elite world, he had handed her this card. "You're the only one who didn't want my money. Celine, He had rasped, his voice like gravel. "You just wanted me to live. If the world ever tries to crush you, you call this number." But only then. She dialed. The phone rang once, twice. "This line is restricted." A deep, robotic voice answered. "State your code." Celine swallowed hard. "Dragonfly," she whispered. It was the nickname Silas had given her because she was always flitting around his room tidying up. There was a click. Silence. Then a human voice, not robotic but aged, powerful, and sharp as a razor. "Celine." Hearing his voice broke the dam. Celine sobbed into the phone, the sound raw and guttural. "Silas, I didn't know who else to call. Where are you?" The voice demanded immediately. No hello, no pleasantries, just instant protective authority. I'm on the street, in front of the Sterling estate. Silas, he threw me out. He has a mistress. Silas, I'm pregnant. I'm cold." There was a silence on the other end, so profound it felt like the air pressure dropped. When Silas spoke again, his voice was terrifyingly quiet. "He threw you out, in the rain, while you were carrying a child." "Yes," Celine wept. "He tossed my anniversary gift in the trash. He said I was boring. He said he's worth 50 million, and he can do whatever he wants." 50 million. Silas repeated the words, dripping with disdain. "Pocket change." "I don't have anywhere to go, Silas." "Look down the street, Celine, to your left." Celine wiped the rain from her eyes and looked. Down the dark road, 2 sets of headlights flared to life. They were blindingly bright. A massive black SUV followed by a limousine peeled out from a side street where they had seemingly been waiting in the shadows. They roared toward her, splashing water high into the air, and screeched to a halt right in front of the bus stop. The back door of the limousine opened. A man in a trench coat held a large umbrella, rushing to shield her. But it wasn't just a driver. Stepping out of the car, leaning on a cane with a silver wolf's head handle, was Silas Thorne. He was older now, his hair snow-white, but his eyes were piercing blue fire. He wore a suit that cost more than Silas's entire wardrobe. He didn't care about the mud. He walked right up to the bench and looked down at her. "Get in the car, Celine," Silas said softly. You were nearby?" she asked, stunned. "I have kept a detail on you for 5 years, child. I promised your father I'd watch over you from a distance. I saw the mistress enter. I was waiting for you to make the decision to leave. I didn't know he had forced you." Silas turned his head toward the glowing windows of the Sterling mansion, up the hill. His jaw tightened. "He thinks he is a king in his little castle," Silas murmured. "He is about to learn that he is merely a tenant in my world." Silas extended a hand. Celine took it. It was warm and strong. "What are we going to do?" Celine asked, as she climbed into the warmth of the limousine, the smell of rich leather enveloping her. Silas climbed in after her. He poured a glass of water from a crystal decanter and handed it to her. Then he picked up a phone built into the car's console. "We are going to teach Silas Sterling the difference between rich and wealthy," Silas said. "Rest now, my dear. Tonight you cry. Tomorrow we hunt." As the limo pulled away, Celine looked back at the house one last time. She saw the silhouette of Silas and Tiffany in the window, toasting with champagne. Inside the car, Silas spoke into the phone. "Execute Protocol 7, freeze the liquidity on the Sterling merger, and get me the file on Tiffany Vance. I want to know where she shops, who she texts, and what skeletons are in her closet. We begin at dawn." Celine touched her stomach. For the first time that night, she didn't feel fear. She felt the rumble of an engine that was much, much more powerful than Silas could ever imagine. The penthouse of the Millennium Tower didn't just overlook the city, it seemed to look down on it in judgment. Inside, the air smelled of expensive mahogany and fresh orchids. Celine sat wrapped in a cashmere blanket that cost more than her wedding ring, staring out at the skyline. It had been 3 days since the night in the rain. Silas Thorne sat opposite her, reading a thick, leather-bound file. He hadn't spoken for 10 minutes. Finally, he snapped the folder shut. "Your husband is a fool," Silas said, his voice cutting through the silence. "But he is a lucky fool. He has managed to hide $3 million of embezzlement through shell companies in the Caymans. If the SEC found out, he would be in federal prison by lunchtime." Celine looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. He stole money." "He calls it creative accounting," Silas scoffed. "He used company funds to pay for that mistress's apartment, her car, and that business trip to Paris last month. He's leveraging the future of his company, Sterling Tech, on a merger with a massive conglomerate called Vanguard Holdings." Silas leaned forward, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. "Do you know who owns Vanguard Holdings?" Celine shook her head. "I do," Silas whispered. "Through a web of 7 different corporations, I own the hand that feeds him. He thinks he's negotiating with a board of directors in London. In reality, he's begging me for money." Celine felt a chill run down her spine. "So you can just fire him?" "I could," Silas nodded. "I could crush him with a phone call. I could bankrupt him by noon. But—" Silas paused, tapping his cane on the floor. "Where is the fun in that? Where is the justice?" He stood up and walked over to the window. "If I destroy him now, he will blame the market. He will blame bad luck. He will play the victim. No, Celine. For a man like Silas, the punishment must be personal. He needs to realize that the architect of his destruction is the very woman he discarded." Silas turned to her, his eyes blazing. "But to do that, Celine Sterling must die." Celine blinked. "What? The woman who cooked pot roast and apologized for taking up space? She is dead. She died in the rain 3 nights ago," Silas declared. "The woman sitting before me needs to be a queen, a shark, someone who can walk into a room and suck the oxygen out of it." He pressed a button on his desk. The double doors opened, and a team of 5 people walked in. A stylist, a tailor, a makeup artist, a speech coach, and a legal consultant. "You have the baby to think of," Silas said gently. "Do you want your child to be raised by a victim or by a warrior?" Celine stood up. She let the expensive blanket fall to the floor. She thought of Tiffany's smirk. She thought of Silas calling her plain. She touched her stomach. "A warrior," Celine said. Her voice didn't shake this time. "Good," Silas gestured to the team. "Get to work. We have the Obsidian Gala in 4 weeks. Silas will be there to sign the Vanguard deal. I want him to sign his death warrant instead." Over the next month, the transformation was grueling. It wasn't just about clothes. Silas's speech coach taught Celine how to lower her register, how to speak slower to command attention, how to hold eye contact until the other person looked away. The legal consultant taught her the ins and outs of Silas's balance sheets until she knew his company better than he did. And the stylists, they performed a miracle. They cut her long, mousy brown hair into a sharp, asymmetrical bob, dyed a deep midnight black. They treated her skin until it glowed. They replaced her loose, floral dresses with tailored power suits and architectural gowns that highlighted her figure while concealing the early signs of her pregnancy. On the final night before the gala, Celine stood in front of the full-length mirror in the guest suite. She wore a custom-made gown of emerald green velvet, structured and sleek. Diamonds, real ones from Silas's private vault, glittered at her throat. But the biggest change was in her eyes. The soft, pleading look was gone. In its place was cold, hard steel. Silas walked in. He stopped leaning on his cane, and for a moment the old man looked emotional. "You look like your mother," he whispered. Then he cleared his throat and held out a dossier. "Your new identity. For tonight you are not Celine Sterling. You are Celine Blackwood, the newly appointed Executive Vice President of Vanguard Holdings." Celine took the file. "He'll recognize me, Silas. It's only been a month." Silas smiled, a wicked glint in his eye. Silas sees only what he wants to see. He saw a housewife. He never really looked at you, Celine. Besides, people see the clothes, the money, and the power. They rarely look at the person underneath. And if he does suspect, well, that's part of the game. Celine smirked, a jagged expression that felt foreign but powerful on her face. "Let's go buy a company." Silas Sterling adjusted his bow tie in the rearview mirror of his Porsche, sweating despite the air conditioning. "Stop fidgeting, babe," Tiffany said from the passenger seat. She was scrolling through Instagram, popping gum. She wore a dress that was bright pink, covered in sequins and cut far too low. It was flashy, expensive, and completely wrong for a black tie business gala. "This is a serious night, Tiffany," Silas snapped. "The Vanguard deal is the only thing keeping the company afloat. If I don't get the chairman's signature tonight, the bank calls in the loans on Monday." "You worry too much." Tiffany rolled her eyes. "You're Silas Sterling. You're a genius. Besides, I posted a story about us coming here. We're trending." Silas gripped the steering wheel. He missed. No, he didn't miss Celine. But he missed the way Celine used to check his tie, tell him he was capable, and ensure he was calm. Tiffany just made him anxious. She had spent $40,000 on his credit card this week alone. They pulled up to the curb of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel. The paparazzi were there, cameras flashing. Silas put on his winning smile, stepping out and guiding Tiffany toward the red carpet. The Obsidian Gala was the most exclusive event in New York. Senators, oil tycoons, and tech moguls mingled under massive crystal chandeliers. Silas scanned the room desperately. "I need to find the Vanguard representatives. They said the chairman wouldn't be here, but his proxy would be." "Relax, let's get a drink," Tiffany whined, pulling him toward the bar. As they waited for champagne, a hush fell over the room. It started at the entrance and rippled through the crowd like a wave. The music lowered. Heads turned. "Who is that?" someone whispered near Silas. "Is that a movie star?" asked another. Silas turned around. Descending the grand staircase was Silas Thorne. The reclusive billionaire hadn't been seen in public for 3 years. His presence alone was headline news. But it wasn't Silas who held the room captive. It was the woman on his arm. She was striking. Her midnight black hair was sharp as a blade, framing a face of porcelain perfection. Her emerald dress hugged curves that looked dangerous. She moved with a fluid grace, her chin held high, looking down at the crowd with an air of bored superiority. Silas felt his breath hitch. Who is that?" Tiffany scoffed, looking at the woman's dress with jealousy. "She looks like a vampire who wears velvet in spring." Silas and the mystery woman reached the bottom of the stairs. A swarm of photographers tried to approach, but Silas raised one hand, and his security detail formed an impenetrable wall. They walked straight toward the VIP section, the area reserved for the biggest investors. "That's him," Silas muttered. "Silas Thorne. If I can get 5 minutes with him." "Go over there, then." Tiffany pushed him. Silas straightened his jacket and navigated through the crowd. He approached the velvet rope guarding the VIP booth. A large security guard stepped in his way. "Mr. Sterling," the guard said, checking a list. "You are not on the list for the inner circle. There must be a mistake." Silas smiled, his charm straining. "I'm here to close the Vanguard deal. Vanguard is a subsidiary of Thorn Enterprises. I need to speak to the proxy." "Let him in." A smoky, deep female voice came from the booth. The guard stepped aside. Silas walked in his heart pounding. Silas Thorn sat on a leather sofa sipping whiskey. The mystery woman stood by the window, her back to Silas, looking out at the city lights. "Mr. Thorn." Silas extended a hand, sweating. "It is an honor. I'm Silas Sterling." Silas didn't shake his hand. He just stared at him with cold amusement. "I know who you are, Mr. Sterling. I've heard interesting things about your accounting practices." Silas froze. "I assure you our books are immaculate." "We'll see," the woman said. She turned around slowly. Silas looked at her face. For a split second, his brain short-circuited. The eyes, they were familiar. The shape of the nose. But this woman radiated power and ice. She looked nothing like the frantic, crying housewife in the blue dress he had thrown out a month ago. This woman was a goddess. "Mr. Sterling," she said, extending a hand, gloved in black silk. "I am Celine Blackwood. I represent Vanguard Holdings." Silas took her hand. It was cold. "Celine Blackwood. That's funny. My ex-wife's name was Celine. Was it—" She raised an eyebrow, not breaking eye contact. "A common name. I assume she wasn't as focused on business as I am." Silas laughed nervously, eager to impress this powerful executive. "Oh God, no. She was a simple woman. No ambition. Honestly, she was a bit of a burden. I had to cut her loose to really focus on the company's potential." Silas Thorn let out a short, dry cough that sounded like a laugh. Celine didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She just stared at Silas with a small, terrifying smile. "A burden. How tragic. Well, Mr. Sterling, you won't find any burdens here. Only business." She picked up a document from the table. "I've reviewed your proposal for the merger. It's lacking." "Lacking?" Silas bristled. "It's a standard acquisition." "Vanguard doesn't do standard," Celine said, stepping closer to him. She smelled of expensive perfume, a scent Silas didn't recognize. "If you want our money, Mr. Sterling, the terms have changed. We want a controlling interest. 51% of your company." 51%. Silas choked. "That's my company, I built it." "With whose money?" Celine asked sharply. "We know about the loans, Silas." She used his first name. It sounded like a whip crack. Silas stammered. He was mesmerized by her. She was terrifying, yet he found himself incredibly attracted to her. She was everything he wanted. Tiffany to be smart, powerful, lethal. "I need to consult my board," Silas said weakly. "You have until midnight," Celine said, checking a diamond watch on her wrist. "At midnight the offer expires and we pull our current funding. You'll be bankrupt by morning." She leaned in close, her lips inches from his ear. "Don't disappoint me, Silas. I hate when men disappoint me." She pulled back and dismissed him with a wave of her hand. Silas stumbled out of the VIP section, his mind reeling. He walked back to the bar where Tiffany was taking selfies. "Well," Tiffany asked, "did you get the money?" I have to give them control," Silas muttered, looking back at the VIP booth where Celine Blackwood was laughing at something Silas said. "But that woman, Tiffany, that woman is incredible." Tiffany's face soured. "Excuse me, you're drooling over some old guy's assistant." "She's not an assistant," Silas whispered. "She's the proxy. She holds my life in her hands." Inside the booth, Silas looked at Celine. "He didn't recognize you." He saw what he wanted to see. Celine said, her voice trembling slightly now that Silas was gone. "He's so arrogant he can't imagine his simple wife could ever exist in this world." "He's hooked," Silas nodded. Now we reel him in. Part 2 of the plan. You need to get him alone. Make him believe that he can charm you into a better deal. Make him betray Tiffany in front of everyone. Celine took a sip of champagne to steady her nerves. Oh, he'll betray her. That's the easy part. The hard part will be not slapping him when he tries to touch me. Patience, my dear, Silas said. The night is young, and the storm is just beginning. The orchestra played a haunting waltz, but Silas Sterling couldn't hear the music. All he could hear was the ticking clock in his head. Midnight. He had less than 2 hours to save his empire. He found Celine Blackwood standing on the terrace overlooking the glittering expanse of Central Park. The wind whipped her emerald dress around her legs, but she stood like a statue, unmoving and cold. Silas approached her, smoothing his hair. He had left Tiffany at the dessert table, where she was loudly complaining about the lack of vegan options to a bewildered waiter. "Ms. Blackwood," Silas said, his voice dropping an octave to what he thought was a seductive purr. "The view is breathtaking, but not nearly as distracting as you." Celine didn't turn. She took a slow sip of her champagne. "Flattery is the currency of the desperate, Silas. I prefer assets, tangible ones." "I'm a tangible asset," Silas said, stepping beside her, leaning his elbows on the stone railing. "I built sterling tech from a garage. I know how to lead." "Do you—" Celine finally turned her gaze to him. Her eyes swept over his shoulder through the glass doors to where Tiffany was now taking a selfie with a reluctant senator. "Because from where I stand, you look like a man tethered to a liability. A loud, tacky liability." Silas flinched. He looked back at Tiffany. In this light, surrounded by the old money and elegance of the gala, Tiffany looked cheap. She was laughing too loudly, her dress was too short, and she was currently spilling chocolate fondue on the carpet. "She's temporary," Silas lied quickly. "A fling. I'm in the process of ending it. A man who cannot control his own household, cannot control a conglomerate like Vanguard," Celine said icily. "Mr. Thorne values discretion. He values class. That woman in there, she is a walking headline waiting to happen. If we buy 51% of your company, we are buying your image. And quite frankly, your image is currently covered in cheap sequins." She set her glass down on the ledge with a sharp clink. "Here is the deal, Silas. The papers are ready in the penthouse suite. I am willing to recommend the acquisition to the board, but I will not sign a deal with a man who brings a circus to a business meeting." She leaned in, her voice a dangerous whisper. "Get rid of her. Now. And I don't mean send her to the car. I mean cut her loose. Show me you can make the hard decisions. Show me you prioritize us over her." Silas looked at Celine, this vision of power and wealth, and then back at Tiffany. It wasn't even a choice. It was a transaction. "Consider it done," Silas said. He turned and marched back into the ballroom. He grabbed Tiffany by the arm hard. "Ow, babe, watch the spray tan," Tiffany squealed. "We're leaving," Silas hissed. "Well, you are leaving." He dragged her toward the side exit, away from the cameras, but still in full view of the VIP balcony, where Celine watched. "What is your problem?" Tiffany yanked her arm free. "You're hurting me." "You're an embarrassment, Tiffany." Silas spat his face red. "Look at you. You don't fit in here. You're a child playing dress-up. I'm trying to close a multi-million-dollar deal, and you're taking selfies with the staff." "You said you liked my dress," Tiffany screamed, her voice echoing in the corridor. "You said I was an upgrade from your boring wife." "You were a mistake," Silas said coldly. "A distraction. And now the distraction is over. Get an Uber. Go back to your apartment. Oh wait, my apartment. I want you out of there by morning. Leave the keys with the doorman." Tiffany's jaw dropped. Tears welled up in her eyes, ruining her mascara. You're dumping me. Here, after everything I did, I helped you pick out your suit. I lied for you. You're nothing, Silas shouted, losing his composure. You are a replaceable accessory, and I am upgrading. Now get out of my sight before I have security throw you out. Tiffany slapped him. It was a weak, stinging slap. Then she ran out the side door, sobbing into the night. Silas straightened his jacket, took a deep breath, and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He composed his face into a mask of indifference. He had done it. He had cut the dead weight. He looked up at the balcony. Celine Blackwood was looking down at him. She raised her glass in a mock toast. Silas felt a surge of triumph. He walked back up the stairs, feeling lighter. He found Celine waiting for him at the entrance to the elevators. It's done, Silas said, breathless. She's gone. For good. Celine looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite place. Was it admiration, or was it disgust? You are a ruthless man, Silas, she said softly. Oh, you discarded her so easily. Just like that. Business requires sacrifice. Silas shrugged. I know what I want, and I know what I need to get it. Yes. Celine said, the elevator doors opening to reveal the private penthouse floor. You certainly do. Come, Mr. Thorne is waiting with the pen. The penthouse suite was silent, save for the scratching of a fountain pen on heavy bond paper. Silas Thorne sat at the head of a long mahogany table, his hands folded over the head of his cane. He watched Silas with the intensity of a predator watching a wounded deer. Silas signed the final page of the contract with a flourish. He felt dizzy with relief. There, Silas said, pushing the heavy stack of documents across the table towards Celine. 51% of Sterling Tech transferred to Vanguard Holdings in exchange for a capital injection of $40 million to cover the strictly temporary liquidity issues. Celine took the documents. She checked the signature. Then she closed the folder and placed her hand on top of it. Congratulations, Silas, she said. You have successfully sold your soul, or at least the company you built. It's a partnership, Silas corrected her, pouring himself a drink from the sideboard without asking. He felt confident now. The deal was done. The money was safe. And now that we are partners, Celine, perhaps we can discuss dinner to celebrate I am a single man now after all. He turned to her, flashing his winning smile. I feel like there is a connection between us. A spark. You understand me in a way my ex-wife never could. Celine stood up slowly. She walked around the table until she was standing directly in front of him. She reached up and unclasped the diamond necklace at her throat, setting it on the table. Your ex-wife, Celine repeated. Tell me about her. What was her name again? Celine. Silas waved a hand dismissively. Celine Sterling. Boring girl. Small-minded. She wanted a family, a dog, a white picket fence. She didn't understand the grind. She didn't understand greatness. She was pregnant, Silas said from the end of the table. His voice was like a thunderclap. Silas froze. He looked at Silas. How did you know that? Because, Celine said, her voice shifting. The cold, low business register faded. Her natural tone warmer, but now laced with venom, returned. Because she told you on your anniversary, right before you threw her out into the rain. Silas dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor, whiskey splashing over his expensive shoes. He stared at the woman in front of him. He looked at her eyes. Really looked at them. You tossed a velvet box in the trash. Celine continued, taking a step closer. It had an ultrasound picture in it. You said you only drink the 2015 vintage. You said I dressed like a librarian. She reached up and pulled the pins from her hair. The sharp, structured bob was real, but as she shook her head, the severe styling softened. She grabbed a wet wipe from the table and aggressively scrubbed the dark lipstick from her mouth. "No," Silas whispered, backing away until he hit the sideboard. "No, that's impossible." "Is it?" Celine asked. "Look at me, Silas. Look at the plain, boring woman you discarded." "Celine." Silas gasped. His face went pale, the color draining away, as if he were bleeding out. "But the hair, the clothes, you're her. I am the mother of your child," Celine said, placing a hand on her stomach. "And I am the executive vice president of the company that now owns you." Silas looked from Celine to Silas. You know her." Silas stood up, his cane thumping heavily on the floor. "Know her? I am her godfather. Did you never wonder who paid for her education? Who sent her the checks she used to pay your rent when you were a failed nobody? You thought she was a nobody. In reality, she is the only person in this world I trust with my legacy." Silas began to hyperventilate. But the deal I signed the deal. I have the money." "You have nothing," Silas barked. "Read the addendum on page 42. Silas scrambled for the papers, his hands shaking so badly he tore the page. What is it?" "Clause 7. Celine recited from memory. "In the event of discovered financial malfeasance, embezzlement, or fraud within the target company prior to acquisition, the majority shareholder, that's us, retains the right to terminate the CEO immediately for cause without severance, and assumes full legal stewardship of all assets to restitute the investors." Celine smiled. "We know about the Cayman accounts, Silas. We know about the shell companies. We have the bank records. I've had them for weeks." You entrapped me," Silas screamed. "This is illegal." "No," Silas said calm. "This is business. You stole from your company. We bought your company. Now we are simply cleaning house." Silas looked at Celine, his eyes wide with terror. He fell to his knees. "Celine, please. Baby, please. I didn't know. I was stressed. Tiffany? She made me crazy. It was a mistake. We can fix this. We're having a baby. Think of the baby." Celine looked down at the man, kneeling in the spilled whiskey and shattered glass. He looked pathetic, small. "I am thinking of the baby," Celine said softly. "That is why I'm doing this. My child will not be raised by a thief. My child will not be raised by a man who treats people like disposable tissues." She walked over to the door and opened it. 2 police officers were waiting in the hallway. "Officers," Celine said coolly, "Mr. Sterling is ready to go now. I believe you have a warrant for his arrest regarding corporate embezzlement and tax fraud." "Celine, no!" Silas cried as the officers grabbed his arms. He struggled, looking back at her. "I'm your husband. I made you." "You didn't make me," Celine said, watching him get dragged into the hallway. "You broke me, and then I built myself back up into something you couldn't survive." As the elevator doors closed on Silas's screaming face, the room fell silent. Celine stood there for a long moment. Then she felt a heavy hand on her shoulder. "You did well, Dragonfly," Silas said gently. Celine let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for a month. "Is it over?" "The war with him is over," Silas said. "But your life, your real life, is just beginning. But first, there is one more thing we must do." "What?" Celine asked. "He destroyed your home," Silas said, walking to the window. "I think it's time we took it back. And I think it's time the world knew exactly who Celine Sterling, no Celine Thorne, really is." 6 months had passed since the night the flashing lights of police cruisers illuminated the Millennium Tower. The scandal of Silas Sterling's arrest had been the lead story on every financial news network for weeks. The Fall of a Wunderkind, the headlines read. They detailed the embezzlement, the shell companies, and the arrogance that led to his destruction. But for Celine, the noise of the media was just background static. She had more important things to focus on. It was a crisp Tuesday morning when a black limousine pulled up to the gated entrance of the Sterling estate, the same house she had been thrown out of in the pouring rain. A for sale by auction seized asset sign hung crookedly on the gate. Celine stepped out of the car. She was 8 months pregnant now, moving a bit slower but with a grace that commanded respect. Silas stood beside her, leaning on his cane, breathing in the fresh air. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Silas asked quietly. "We could buy any house in the Hamptons. You don't need to return to the scene of the crime." "I do," Celine said, looking up at the imposing stone facade. "He defiled this place. He made me feel small here. I need to buy it back. I need to scrub his memory from the walls and fill it with something good. I'm not doing this for Silas. I'm doing it for my son. This is his birthright." The auction was a formality. No one dared bid against Vanguard Holdings. Celine bought the house for a fraction of what Silas claimed it was worth. As she walked through the front door, the house felt empty. The furniture, Silas's cold, modern, uncomfortable furniture, had been repossessed. The house echoed. Celine walked to the dining room. She stood in the spot where Silas had thrown her anniversary gift in the trash. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Burn the drapes," Celine said to the assistant standing behind her. "Burn them all. Paint the walls a warm cream. Bring in light. I want a nursery in the master suite, and the wine cellar clear it out. Turn it into a playroom." "Yes, Miss Thorne," the assistant said. Ms. Thorne. She had legally changed her name last month. The Sterling name was poisoned, and she wanted no part of it. Silas had adopted her in an adult adoption ceremony that was private, tearful, and the proudest moment of the old billionaire's life. 2 weeks later, Celine sat in a sterile grey visitation room at the Federal Correctional Institution in Otisville. The door buzzed, and Silas was led in. He was wearing a jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. His head was shaved. The dashing CEO was gone. In his place was a hollow, trembling man who looked 10 years older. He sat down, shackled to the table. He refused to look her in the eye. "Hello, Silas," Celine said calmly. "You came." His voice was raspy. I thought you wouldn't come." "I brought the divorce papers." Celine slid a manila envelope across the metal table. "And the relinquishment of parental rights." Silas looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Celine, please, don't take my kid away from me. I have nothing. I'm going to be in here for 15 years. Please let me have a photo. Let me have something." "You chose Tiffany," Celine said, her voice devoid of pity. "You chose the money. You chose the image. You made your choice, Silas. You told me I was plain. You told me I was boring. Well, this boring woman just secured a $1 billion contract for Vanguard." "I know," Silas sobbed. "I see you in the magazines. Everyone talks about you. Celine, I'm sorry. I swear to God I'm sorry." "I know you are," Celine said, standing up. "But you're not sorry you hurt me. You're sorry you lost. There is a difference." She turned to leave. "Wait," Silas cried out. "What about Tiffany? Did she at least stick around?" Celine stopped at the door and looked back. "Tiffany, oh Silas, didn't you hear?" She sold her story to a tabloid for $5,000. She painted you as a monster who manipulated her. She's currently facing lawsuits for using company credit cards. She's working as a hostess at a dive bar in Jersey. She blamed you for everything. Silas slumped in his chair, defeated. The last thing he saw was Celine walking out the door, the heavy steel slamming shut with a finality that echoed in his soul. The seasons changed. Winter turned to spring, and on a warm night in April, the new Stirling No. The Thorn estate was filled with the sound of life. Celine sat in the rocking chair in the nursery, holding a sleeping bundle in her arms. Baby Leo. He had Silas's chin, but he had Celine's eyes. Silas walked in quietly. He looked at the baby with a reverence he usually reserved for stock market crashes. He reached out a wrinkled finger, and the baby's tiny hand gripped it tight. "He is strong," Silas whispered. "He has a grip like a thorn." "He's perfect," Celine smiled, exhausted but radiant. "The board called," Silas said softly. "They want to name you chairwoman. I'm stepping down, Celine, officially. I want to spend my remaining years teaching this little one how to play chess." Celine looked at the old man who had saved her life. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything," Silas said. "You took a broken company and fixed it. You took a broken life and rebuilt it into a fortress. You are the leader they need." Celine looked out the window. The rain was falling again, just like that night at the bus stop. But this time she wasn't cold. She wasn't alone. She was safe. She was powerful. And she was loved. She thought of the young woman who had been dragged out of the house, crying and begging. She wished she could go back and whisper in her ear, "Hold on. The pain is just the fuel you need to burn the world down and build a new one." "I accept," Celine said. Silas smiled and kissed her forehead. "Long live the Queen." As the thunder rolled in the distance, Celine held her son closer. The storm could rage all it wanted. She was the storm now. What a journey! Celine proved that when you have nothing left to lose, you become the most dangerous person in the room. Silas thought he could throw away a plain wife, but he didn't realize that diamonds only form under pressure. It's a harsh lesson in karma. Be careful who you step on while climbing the ladder, because they might be the one holding the safety net when you fall. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story, and let me know in the comments. Do you think Silas deserved 15 years, or was losing his family the real punishment? I'll see you in the next